We're doing this again. Looks like it. Since the 90s, this problem hasn't gone away. As soon as something happens or someone is supposed to be held accountable for something, we end up with this situation. Let's blame the video games. Let's blame the movies and the R-rated movies and the Deadpools and all the other people on the planet. Let's blame everybody else but ourselves. Let's make sure we have no accountability, because why should we? If you don't know what I'm talking about, currently there is a debate going in the United States about gun control, over the fact that it's not gun control that we need, it's not the fact that we have to minimize the age and licensing of guns so that minors do not get a hold of these, or people with mental conditions, severe mental conditions mind you, who end up using these guns as a way to kind of get back at people. It's not the fact that as adults we should look into bullying at schools and find out why kids actually do this to one another, or the fact that as parents we need to actually deal with our shitty little children. And I'm not talking about all parents, I'm just talking about the ones who don't hold themselves accountable for their children's behaviour. This is kind of the problem here. It's a big problem, and a big one that we all have to take some brunt of. As a child myself, I used to watch RoboCop, The Godfather, and at the age of 5 and 7, that could be a lot to take in for someone as young as myself. But it didn't do much to me. Yes, I do have anxiety and depression, but a lot of that was due to bullying and being beaten the crap out of most of my life. And you know, the funny thing about it is, video games were the one thing that got me out of it. Yeah, it got me out of the funk. So when you talk about video games and everything that video games have done, or that it's the main cause of the reason why our society is the way it is, we've got to look at a few variables, don't we? Firstly, as parents, you've got to stop buying 18 rated games or over, or games that are not rated for your small child to be playing with, despite the fact that Timmy might be yelling at you constantly and crying, and that the only way to shut him up is to buy him that game. Here's an idea. Stick your heels in and say, no, I'm the adult, you're the child, you need to learn from me, and I'm telling you right now, you cannot play GTA 5. You have congressmen and people wearing suits and ties who probably never played a video game in their lives sit there and debate stuff like this, and stating that it needs to be done and it needs to be said and the industry needs to be a lot tougher. Well, here's a tough stance to take. Why don't you fine every corporation who does this method, who lets the customer walk away with a game that is intended for their child? Because I'll tell you one thing, if I was working in a shop like Game, for instance, I probably wouldn't be allowing a small child to buy a game that is not in their age range. Suck it up, kid. Go and buy a Nintendo and play some Mario, because I guarantee you, you won't be playing any shoot 'em ups while I'm around. You lot could say it's harsh, a lot of the kids can sit there and cry and scream and whatever, but I've had first-hand experience, especially playing GTA 5, when I'm listening to a 5-year-old child sit there and talk about the fact that he loves pussy. Yes, a 5-year-old child whose mum uses his Xbox as a babysitter.
Oh no! Oh my gosh!
Now, this shouldn't be said. It should be obvious that you shouldn't eat a Tide Pod. There shouldn't be a congressman making a law on this. There shouldn't be congressmen making laws on the fact that you shouldn't be bullied. It's quite common sense, really, isn't it? But it seems that we're living in a society where common sense is not that common. So we're left in this situation. We're left basically sitting there, twiddling our fingers, twiddling our thumbs, trying to figure out what it is we're doing wrong and why the situation has come to such. Well, let's look at the figures, shall we? This wasn't the first time that we have to debate with the 90s and the inception of the Entertainment Software Association, formerly the Interactive Digital Software Association, in response to their heavy criticism and controversy around adult games, and those in Congress screaming,
"Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?"
The system is supposed to be used to stop children from attaining games that aren't legally allowed to play. And this, well, it doesn't happen. The board assigns ratings in game-based content using judgments similar to the motion picture rating system, using a combination of 6 age-based levels. indeed to aid consumers in determining a game's content and suitability, along with a system of content descriptors, which detail specific types of content present in particular games. It's basically a code of ethics, including a new system that is being used for digitally distributed games and mobile apps. Researchers at the University of York have found no evidence to support that the theory that video games make players more violent, and in a series of 3,000 participants, the team demonstrated that video game concepts do not prime players to behave in a certain way, and that increasing realism of violent video games does not necessarily increase aggression rates. Dr. David Zendel from the university's Department of Computer Science said, "If players are primed through immersing themselves in the concepts of a game, they should be able to categorize the object's association with the game more quickly in the real world once the game has been concluded." Across the two games, we didn't find this to be the case. Participants who play a car-themed game were no quicker to categorize vehicle images, and indeed, in some cases, the reaction was significantly slower. Researchers at the University of Queensland in Australia examined whether video games with varying degrees of violence negatively affect players' pro-social behavior or their voluntary actions that benefit another individual or group. Test subjects played 15 minutes of either violent or non-violent video games, and researchers then measured propensity to give to a charity as well as the level of difficulty they chose for a cash-incentivized puzzle. Given to other subjects, in accordance with research published in the journal Computers in the Human Behavior, more violent on-screen play did not make people meaner in either metric. In fact, those who played violent video games actually gave more to charity. Additional studies reached similar conclusions, some even finding benefits to playing fast-paced games. According to Daphne Bavela, a cognitive neuroscientist at the University of Geneva in Switzerland and the University of Rochester in New York, first-person shooter video games can improve players' vision and attention. Bavela hypothesized that these effects might help explain why younger gamers often make superior laparoscopic surgeons and commit fewer errors than their more experienced peers. The University of Buffalo communications professor Matthew Grizzard showed that when research subjects chose to play as a terrorist in a first-person shooter, they often felt more guilt over the moral transgressions than those playing as a United Nations soldier. Research from Stetson University psychologist Christopher Ferguson has repeatedly found there's no link between violent games and social aggression. Most recently, Ferguson found that children who play violent games are less likely to bully their peers. Villanova University psychologist Patrick McKay and his colleagues recently examined the broader entertainment landscape and explored whether exposure to media violence leads to actual violence. Their research revealed a negative correlation between on-screen violence and violent crime over the last 50 years. Ferguson, writing in the Journal of Communication, later corroborated the argument by examining the rates of violence among Americans aged 12 to 17 over the last 2 decades. If media violence is a precursor to social violence, the introduction of violence in video games in the United States would be expected to precipitate increased youth violence rate, Ferguson said. Violent video games consumption increased nearly 8 times in 20 years, while violent rates among teenagers and Americans fell nearly 30 points from 35 to 6 per 1,000 people. Bullying comprises of all types of intentional and repeated aggression with no evident or reason, performed by one or more students against others, causing pain and distress. It happens in unequivocal power relationships, such as asymmetry may be resulting from different age, size, physical and emotional development from the aggressor finding support of the majority of students. Aggressive acts take place in the school environment are traditionally admitted as natural, ignored, or taken for granted by both teachers and parents. Now, President Trump states we have to look at the internet because a lot of bad things are happening to young kids and young minds, and their minds are being formed, and we have to do something. And maybe what they're seeing is how they're seeing it, Trump said. And also video games, in hearing more and more people say the level of violence in video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. This is without any thought or realization in regards to any of the information given in front of him. All the information contradicts that, but because he hears somebody else say, well, this is the case, he believes it. The American Psychologists Association categorizes violent video games as a risk factor in causing aggression, but found no evidence linking them to act of real-world criminality or delinquency. Aggression, which is also caused by competitive sports, is not sufficient to lead to real-world violence in 2017. A media psychologist and technology division of the APA advised public officials and journalists against attempts to link violence media to acts of real-world violence. Efforts to link violent crimes and violent video games and other media may persist due to well-known phenomenon called confirmation bias, or a tendency to pay attention to only information that confirms prior beliefs and ignore those which does not provide that same statement or paint that same narrative. Basically, it means that anybody else who believes in such basically lean towards things that sound a little bit like what they're believing is true, but is not actually based on any facts. Studies on the influence of the school environment and education systems on the academic development of young people have already been carried out, but they must also be approached under the point of view of health care. The school has an important meaning to children and adolescents, that those who do not enjoy it are more than likely to show unsatisfying performance, physical and emotional problems, or unfulfillment, such as those who go to work in a meaningless job where they have an employer who treats them badly. Their work rate slows. Feelings towards life, positive interpretation and interpersonal relationships and academic development are directly interconnected. Students that realize such a relationship are more likely to reach a good learning level. Therefore, the acceptance by peers is fundamental for development of children and adolescents' health. It does help them refine their social abilities and strengthen their capacity in reacting against tense situations. Aggressiveness in schools and is pretty much a universal problem. Bullying and victimization represent a different type of involvement in violent situations during childhood and adolescence. Bullying is a form of interpersonal power, affirmation by means of aggression, and by victimization is meant as aggressive behavior performed towards the less powerful person by a more powerful one. Both bullying and victimization can have immediate and long-term adverse outcomes to all involved: aggressors, victims, anyone who even observes it. And as you can tell there, we've looked at those figures. Science has proven this. And I know a lot of you people sit there and go, science? Pfft, what's science ever done for me? Well, I'm sorry about that, and I understand that you have your deities and gods and whatever the hell you pray to sitting there, pray tell, telling you exactly what you need to do because you want to pray the gay away and also pray that your child is better. See how far that's gotten us. But the fact is, you need to focus on what to do and what is the right thing to do. And the right thing to do, I'm not saying that games don't need to be legislated, because they're currently being legislated. And by far, I understand your qualms. I understand you want to find a solution to guns. Well, I'll tell you what, you can use something called gun control. It doesn't mean your guns get taken away from you. It just means that the people who sell them have to make sure they're selling them to the right person, and they are selling them proactively to someone who is trained in using them. Also, you need better mental health checks, because I'm sorry, if you don't have a system that's in place to take care of people who are not mentally sound of body and mind, you are going to get a situation similar to this. Suicide is a big thing, and it's a big thing because people don't deal with it. because we've built up a system where we have to be very masculine about our feelings and hide them. That if you have a mental issue or something that basically has been carrying away by you like a burden for the rest of your life, you have to literally shut the fuck up about it and not tell anyone. You don't have doctors who are practically being overwhelmed at this point helping you unless you have the funds to do so. If you want to make the situation go away or make it a lot harder, then you have to put these laws in check. Stop attacking video games and deflecting at people saying that it's that problem or it's that person's fault when quite clearly the solution is right in front of you. You can't sit here and tell me that as a gamer it's my fault, or as a actor it's my fault because I star in something that is too seedy. You're not going to let a 5-year-old get up and watch The Walking Dead, are we? And if you are, that really, really is very shitty of you to do so. I understand that some parents want to share their experiences with their children, but you can wait till they grow a lot older so they understand. Me being at a very young age, I was afraid of Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, but now as a 36-year-old man, I actually understand who he is and that he's an actor. Do you see how we differentiate things as a child to as we differentiate things as an adult? Children have very overactive minds, so we need to make sure that we protect them from certain things. And it's based on the adult's decision. As an adult, it's up to you what you want to expose your child to. I understand that. But in the end, to criticize someone else and say things like, well, I would rather my child be a bully than being bullied. You're part of the problem. You and everyone like you is part of the problem. So maybe we need to get off our asses, think of the solutions, and actually, pun intended, bite the bullet to say, hey, maybe, just maybe, there are other solutions that we can have rather than attacking things that people like to play. Without gaming, without films, without television, without storytelling, I probably would be dead by now. Because being a creative is how I focus my life, and it's the industry that I'm in. And by attacking it, by attacking actors who do voiceovers in games, by attacking the game developers, the screenwriters, the people who work in the creative industry, all you're doing is just attacking creativity in general. You're attacking creativity as a whole. What are you going to do next? Attack cosplayers because they dress in a certain way? Are you going to attack con managers because they expose people to geeky things? Stop throwing the blame and start acknowledging the problem and dealing with it. That's the only way you're going to get around this. But that is entirely my opinion. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think. Tell me exactly what your opinion is by leaving a comment below, and also like, commenting and subscribing on this channel. As I said, I am very busy doing loads of acting and auditions, but I will be posting videos as soon as I can, and I wanted to acknowledge this today and also try out my lovely Canon EOS 1300D camera to see how that changes and differs from my Blackmagic 2.5K, but we shall see. And that's it. And as always, make sure that you check out the other videos in the Rather British Review, check out my other videos on this channel, and this has been Michael Burhan letting you know that I've got gameplay. Have you? See you soon.